Hey up, and welcome to Ember Keeper Stories. This is an Halloween special, and the stories I've selected for you tonight are designed to have a bit more bite and to make you think twice before you turn the heat off and eat. I hope you enjoy them. This first story is called The Mirror in Room 217. They say that the Briarwood Inn is old, not haunted. But that's because the owners pay to keep the stories quiet. When Claire checked in that October night, the front desk clerk avoided eye contact. She was one of only two guests that night. Her room, 217, were on the second floor in a corner, and it smelt faintly of mildew and lemon cleaner. She noticed, though, that the mirror above the dresser was strangely ornate. Black frame, carved roses, and glass that shimmered faintly even in dark. She'd driven 4 hours for a weekend photography retreat, hoping for some solitude. But from the moment she set her camera bag down, she felt it. A cold breath across the back of her neck. She laughed it off, though. It's an old building, she told herself, full of creaks and drafts. That night, though, after a long shower, Claire stood brushing her hair before the mirror. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the reflection didn't move with her. She froze. The reflection's hand paused mid-brush, lagging half a second behind her own. And then it smiled. Only she weren't smiling. The lights blinked again, and when they came back, the reflection were normal. She turned away, shaking her, telling herself she were overtired. Maybe it were the warped old glass. When she got into the bed, the room seemed colder, breath visible in the air, and then she heard it, faint scratching from the dresser. She turned toward the sound, and nothing. The mirror caught the moonlight from the window, and in the dim silver glow, there was movement behind the glass, a shadow pacing slowly. Claire sat up. "Who's there?" she asked. The reflection stopped. Its head tilted, bird-like, unnaturally sharp. Then, softly, from nowhere, and everywhere all at once, a whisper. "You called me." She backed towards the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. The whisper grew louder, layered with others, dozens of them, murmuring from behind the mirror, and suddenly she could see them. Pale faces pressed against the inside of the glass, mouths open in silent screams. The mirror began to bulge outward, the glass stretching like skin. She grabbed her phone to call the front desk, but there were no signal. The screen flickered, showing her reflection again, but now she was inside the mirror, pounding to get out, eyes wide with terror. Behind her reflection, the faces grinned. The mirror shattered. When the clerk came to check on the noise in room 217, it were empty, except for the camera bag still in the chair and the mirror frame hanging on the wall. The glass were gone, shards scattered like ice across the floor. They replaced the glass the next day, of course. It's an antique, after all. If you ever stay in room 217, you'll see fingerprints on the inside of the mirror. Small, desperate handprints, and no matter how many times I try to clean it, they never go away. And sometimes, just before dawn, if you look long enough, your reflection smiles back before you do. This next story is called The Ashwood Coven. They used to burn witches in Ashwood, at least that's what the old stones say, blackened and half buried in the forest behind the town. Nobody goes there anymore, except teenagers on days. And that's exactly why Mara, Eli and June found themselves hiking there on a cold November night. Flashlights in hand, the breath fogged the air like smoke. The trail was thin, swallowed by moss and roots, The trees grew so close together that the branches wove into a ceiling, and the moonlight barely touched the ground. They reached the clearing around midnight, a circle of stones around a cracked slab like an altar. Someone had carved symbols into it, old and uneven. Eli laughed. Probably high school kids, fake Satan sort of stuff. But June, the quiet one, brushed her fingers over one of the carvings. It were warm. Feels fresh, she whispered to herself. And then they heard it. Faint chanting from the woods, low and rhythmic, like voices speaking backwards. Eli turned, shining his flashlight toward the trees. Nothing. Just the sound growing louder and closer. The air smelled of iron and something sweet, like burning herbs. Mara tried to joke. Probably a podcast or something, but her voice shook. The chanting stopped. A moment later, the forest exhaled, wind rushing through the branches that hadn't moved all night, and from between the trees, figures stepped into the clearing. 5 of them, wrapped in tattered shawls, faces hidden by masks made of bark and bone. Eli dropped his flashlight. The beam rolled across the ground, lighting the feet, bare, blackened and caked in ash. One of them spoke, a voice dry and crackling. "You shouldn't be here." Mara stammered, "We didn't mean to." The woman raised a hand. "You woke us." The ground trembled, and from beneath the altar stone, something pulsed. Faint red light seeping through the cracks. June stumbled back. "What is that?" The woman's voice deepened. "What's owed?" And before they could move, roots burst from the soil, wrapping around their ankles. Eli screamed as the vines pulled him to his knees. Mara tried to help, but the ground beneath the stone split open, revealing darkness deeper than the earth itself, and the smell of smoke, centuries old. The women began to chant again, the words ancient, heavy, and the masks glowed faintly. June, trembling, shouted over them, "Stop, please!" And then silence. Every sound in the forest cut off. The tallest witch stepped forward, removing a mask. Her face was pale, skin cracked like old parchment, but her eyes were alive, black and endless. She reached out a hand towards June. "You called us," she said softly. "You touched the mark." June shook her eyes, crying, "I didn't mean to." Intent doesn't matter. Balance does. Eli's flashlight flicked once, and in that brief flash, all 5 witches stood inches away. The light went out one more time, and when it came back, they were all gone, but so were June. Mara and Eli ran until dawn, until the forest finally spat them out onto a dirt road. They didn't stop until they reached town. When the sheriff led a search party back, they found the clearing, but no altar, no carvings, just a circle of scorched earth and 3 things at its centre. A pile of blackened twigs, a single cracked flashlight, and June's pendant, melted into the stone. If you walk into the Ashwood Forest today, you can still find that clearing, if you know where to look. But don't touch the stones, because the wishes of Ashwood aren't gone. They're just waiting for somebody else to wake them. The fire's beginning to dwindle, and our time tonight is coming to a close. But we've time for one last story. This one's called The Walls Are Breathing. Nobody believed Daniel when he said the house were alive. When he bought it, the place had been abandoned for years. An old Victorian at edge of town, choked in ivy, windows clouded with dust. The real estate agent called it a fixer-upper. He just called it a fresh start. After the divorce, Daniel needed quiet, a place to rebuild and to think. The first night, the silence was thick. No traffic, no neighbours, just wind moaning through the chimney and the occasional groan of wood settling. By morning, he'd already started renovating, scraping wallpaper and sanding floors. He found odd things behind the walls. Children's drawings, old toys, and even a cracked photograph for a family smiling stiffly. The father in the picture looked a lot like he did. That night, he woke to a sound of whispering, faint, just beneath the floorboards. Pressed his ear to the wall and swore he heard the words, "Daniel, come home." He laughed it off though. Maybe it weren't pipes, maybe it was just exhaustion. But then came the heartbeat. Slow, steady, and rhythmic. He felt it through the walls, a deep vibration, like the entire house were breathing around him. And by the third day, he'd stopped laughing. Every time he peeled wallpaper, he found more drawings, dozens of them, scrawled in childlike crayon. A house, a man standing in a window, and the words, "He won't leave." He tried to call a contractor, but his phone only gave static. His emails wouldn't send. The power flickered. The house was trying to isolate him, and he couldn't explain why that didn't feel impossible, just expected. When he looked outside, the world seemed wrong. The trees were too still. The sky had no colour. Once, he swore he saw somebody standing in the yard. A tall, pale figure with no face. Just the impression, her eyes staring straight through him. He'd stopped sleeping. The walls whispered constantly now, telling him things in his own voice. "You built this," they said. "You wanted this." One night, he tore open a section of the wall with a crowbar. The smell hit him first, rot and earth. Inside was a cavity large enough to crawl into, and inside it, bones. Human bones. Small human bones. He screamed until his throat tore raw. Then the whisper came again, right behind him, close enough to feel the breath on the back of his neck. "Don't wake her." He turned, but there were nobody there. But the shadows along the ceiling pulsed, moving like lungs. He fled the house that night, or at least he thought he did. He ran through the front door and down the drive, but when he looked back, the house was gone, and in its place were forest, endless, stretching in every direction. And then he heard it. A creak, the sound of a door opening. He turned, and the house was right behind him again. Front door wide, lights glowing warmly inside, beckoning him in. When they found him days later, wandering barefoot through the trees, eyes bloodshot, clothes shredded, he kept whispering, "It won't let me go. The house won't let me go." They admitted him, of course. He's in psychiatric ward now, room 12A. At night, the nurses say he talks at walls, calmly like an old friend. He says the house is still alive, and that it's here with him now, that it followed him. Sometimes, when they check his room after lights out, they swear they see the paint ripple, like the walls are breathing. And sometimes, when Daniel sleeps, he smiles, a faint, knowing smile, and the sound of a heartbeat fills the hall. And with that, it's time to give it to It's come to an end. I hope you've enjoyed these stories, because I've enjoyed telling them to you. And I want to wish you all a happy Halloween. Until next time though, stay safe and keep the embers burning. Ta-ra.